This takes me back to my radio show days. 10 years of hosting a radio show, and this is a very, very made for sports radio topic. Okay, so stick with me here. This is all about a hypothetical. I do not expect this to really happen, but okay. So it was a rough first year for Oklahoma in the SEC, right? Their basketball team did get a nice win this week. Congratulations to Porter Moser and the Sooners, but they're 5-12 in the SEC in hoops, trying to hang on to the NCAA tournament. And then in football, obviously 6-7. And while it wasn't rough for their bank account this year, they made a lot more money. It was a tough one on the fan base, man. I see enough of Sooner Twitter to understand how difficult that is for the fan base right now to make that kind of impression in the SEC, especially when Texas did very well and advanced to the semifinals of the college football playoff. And I know it sounds totally crazy here, okay? But I just mentioned Dan Wetzel and the boys on the College Football Inquirer podcast. ESPN's Dan Wetzel laid out a great hypothetical scenario that might get Oklahoma fans clamoring to come back to the Big 12. Okay. Now, I'm not dumb and naive enough to think anybody is making any reversal moves coming back to the Big 12. This is not that. Okay. Don't just click off because of that. I'm asking you to hang with me and listen to this hypothetical scenario. Okay. It's all surrounded by the idea that, hey, we've seen now the ACC has offered the chance for big brands and successful teams to make extra money and take revenue away from teams who are not successful and are not big brands in their conference. Okay. So keep that in mind as I bring this clip up from Dan Wetzel. So here we go.
I know the SEC's got money. We all know where this is headed, but this is a nice little spot where you could be in this playoff anytime you're even reasonably good. You go to the SEC and you're going to find out how hard it is. And as I always thought, if the Big 12 had been able to sell that to Oklahoma, you know, that's what Oklahoma gave up. They made a lot of playoffs. I don't think they're going to make as many playoffs anymore. We'll see. Nothing against Oklahoma, but it's just a lot harder to beat all these guys than it was to beat the old guys.
Okay. Dan Wetzel's theory there, and he was talking about like, hey, you know, Florida State and Clemson, isn't this actually a really nice scenario that you've got set up in the ACC? Now you've kind of halved the financial gap, and you can just go to the playoff every year because you're about to have 2 automatic bids to the playoff. So as long as you are relatively good, you should be in the playoff every year. You'll be still making a decent chunk of money, and you're not going to go get beat up in the SEC like Oklahoma. So, okay, hear me out here. If you could make this case, and I know that you can't, I say toothpaste out of the tube all the time. It is way out of the tube on this. But if you could put truth serum in an Oklahoma fan and say, hey, what about this scenario? Okay. What about this scenario? Listen, you guys just experienced what life in the SEC was like, and it was 6-6. That's what life in the SEC was like. It was 6-6 life. Not fun, not what you're accustomed to, not what you want. SEC basketball now looks like the best basketball league in the country. You just experienced what that was like. Not that you care nearly as much about that as football, but you know, you're 5-12 in the SEC in basketball. How about Big 12 football? Because of what your league is doing to demand these automatic bids, the Big 12 is going to have 2 bids every year to that playoff, man. 2 bids every single year. Okay. Let's go through the history of Oklahoma in the Big 12. They won the Big 12 14 times, and all of those came post-2000. So they were winning more than every other year. Almost like 2/3 of the years they're winning the league. And then, of course, there are other leagues where they're losing the Big 12 championship game, potentially finishing in what would have been a number 2 spot. You're talking about almost every single year being in the playoff based on what the history was in the Big 12. Getting you in the playoff, by the way, will earn you, if we're going by the way the ACC is laying this out, $4 million per round until you get to the semis, and you're getting $6 million and beyond. So you're talking about stacking extra playoff money, success initiative money. If the Big 12 were to follow this plan and do it, which right now they have no incentive to do because there's no brand that's going to want to push for that. Nobody in the Big 12 is a dominant or successful enough brand or program in football right now to do this. But if Oklahoma came back and you could say, all right, well, we'll take the ACC blueprint. You guys can earn up to 20 or 25 million extra per year because of the success initiative. You will take a hit from what you made this year in the SEC, but it will be maybe like a $10 million per year hit, $15 million per year hit, but you can go to the playoff every year. Okay. And you will still be pretty close financially. If you gave truth serum to Oklahoma fans, how many would really be thumbing their nose at that? I understand that the idea here is all about prestige and the future of the sport, but I wouldn't really be concerned about the future if I were Oklahoma here either, because you're going to be fine. Like whatever the sport evolves into, Super League time, when that comes around, you will be fine. There is nothing to worry about there. It would be just a nice landing spot here for the next 5 or 6 years where you can continue. I mean, brand build, get in the playoff every year, make a substantial amount of money, more than the rest of your peers. They'll be exalted above the rest of your peers in the Big 12 and not have to get your ass kicked in the SEC. That's really it. Now, if you wanted to counter and say, John, one of those years Brent Venables was in the Big 12, he went 500 too. Yeah, fair enough. Okay. Yeah, maybe you just, a lot of it is you just don't have the guy. But you're seeing how poorly things can go if you don't have the guy really fast in the SEC. You've got a little more leeway on that in the Big 12. So, to me, that's a pretty compelling and interesting case there. Now, would you even want that if you're the Big 12? That's a whole different discussion, because Big 12 people are very, very sour on Texas and how that went with the unequal revenue sharing, in essence, there with what they did with the Longhorn Network, and just a person in the boardroom who has more authority and power than everybody else. It's not a vibe that anybody liked and had to deal with for so long. I mean, it started from day one in the Big 12 with Texas making Nebraska mad. I was just reading some more about that the other day with the Prop 48 guys and all that happened with Nebraska early on. So Big 12 fans may not want to deal with that anyway if you were putting true serum into Big 12 fans. But I really do wonder about that for OU fans, and that is really... It's fascinating to me for the other reason, just because the Big 12 is the one league right now. When I said, hey, people are going to copy the ACC's way of doing this, their success initiatives, their brand initiatives, you will see that in other conferences. The Big 12 is the one where, I don't know that you would really see that, right? Because who's going to be demanding it? Who's got the dominant team and brand they think right now? Colorado dominated the TV ratings last year. But do they is Coach Prime here for the next 5 or 6 years? I mean, that's what's driving the ratings. It's one guy. And I'm not trying to say that I think he's a flight risk tomorrow or something necessarily, but he flirted with the Cowboys publicly this offseason. So it's pretty contingent on that. I think Utah thought they were at that level of a program, and then they went 5-7. Kansas has the huge basketball brand, but basketball is just a moderate to small chunk of this. It's obviously driven by football. Tech's got all the money, but hasn't turned it into winning yet. I mean, BYU, I guess, might have the potential, but I don't think BYU is going to be someone that would really push it anyway. So you don't have much of a reason to if you're the Big 12 now. But if you could tangle it in front of an Oklahoma, and again, this is a hypothetical. I know it. This is nothing realistic at all, but an interesting discussion. Wouldn't that be a better existence? Wouldn't that be a better existence if you are a fan? If you're an Oklahoma fan, I would think that would be a better existence. You would have more fun as a fan doing that than you would having to live the life of going 6-7 in the SEC. Just my 2 cents there. But I understand the SEC is fun and it's exciting, but it's only fun and exciting to go play at Georgia until you're having to play at Georgia and realizing the reality of that very, very quickly. So I don't know. Hey, Oklahoma fans, if you're here, Oklahoma fans come across this, let me know. Let me know in the comments. What do you think? And it's kind of along the lines of people saying the same thing with Nebraska fans. been polls out. I did was it the Omaha World Herald? Did they do a poll one time of like, hey, would Nebraska fans want to be back in the Big 12? I feel like one of those polls came back maybe like 60-40 yes. So yeah, anyway, I think after a while of getting beat up in your new league, it could be like, hey, maybe the grass wasn't so green here, even though we're getting a lot more green in our pockets. See what I did there?